Hey everyone, my name is Spencer Bauke, and I am super excited to bring you week 2 of Workout Wednesday Power BI edition. This week, we're going to be building out a basic KPI report, but before we do, I want to touch on the first week that we had in which we brought in a data set up a data model, and did some basic cleaning. If you haven't already done week 1, I highly suggest you go back and do it. It does not take very long. And for people who have opened Power BI a couple of times before, it shouldn't be too hard to figure out. There is one issue that I forgot to mention in our solutions video last week. Please remove the conference median value under the NCAA subdivision field. This is just another aggregation value that is included in a row that we don't want. So please go ahead and take that out. Like I said, I forgot to include that in last week's solution video, but I did update the blog very shortly after the challenge was released last week on Tuesday. So if you didn't see that, go ahead and fix it now in your data model. And if you did see it, good job. We are that much closer to moving on to this week's challenge. So let's close and apply that change to our data model. We're going to be right back there in a second, but I want to first go over the challenge for this week. So first we need to create a profits calculation in Power Query using some of the fields that we have in our data set. Then we need to create a report with 3 high-level KPIs, and in this case it's revenues, expenses, and profits. So we're going to need that profits for the second requirement. We're going to need to build a trend line, a conference breakdown for each of our high-level KPIs, and then we're going to need to indicate that this is the summary view. And some of the design is up to you. This is not need to look the same for every user, but you do need to fulfill those requirements. So if you have a different way of showing it, we would love to see your creativity and let that shine through. So let's start with our first requirement. I'm actually going to go right back into Power Query. I'm going to open this up and go to our finances fact table, where I've already created this field, but I'm going to show you how I did it, how I did it, and then I'm going to go here to our little wheel to see what I did. So I added a custom column. So if you were to go up here to add column, custom column, okay, you're going to get, I'm trying to insert it into this process. One second. If I go to the end, I could insert it, but I don't want to in this instance. And I'm going to create a profits column. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to take my total revenues and I'm going to subtract my total expenses. Then I'm going to add back in my excess transfers back, which essentially are payments made from athletic departments to the university so that they don't have to report them as revenues. There may be some tax advantages and accounting advantages by doing that. So to find how truly profitable a athletic department is, which that's a topic of our data, we're going to add those payments back in. So I would click OK here. Since I've already created it, I'm just going to X out, but you click OK, and it's going to create your column. Now make sure that that is in the proper format, and we're going to want it in a decimal number. So go ahead and make sure that that is selected. So once we're done creating the total profits column, we're going to close and apply, and that's going to take us back to our desktop. So now that we have our total profits field created, let's start with creating our KPI dashboard, or report, excuse me, KPI report. So for those unfamiliar, and maybe if you're coming from the Tableau world, you'll see that the layout's a little different here. Essentially, you add different visualizations from your visualization menu over here to the right in the visualizations pane, or your text box from this area up here onto one page. So unlike Tableau, where you have different worksheets that then you add to a dashboard. This is essentially your equivalent of a Tableau dashboard, and we call this a report in the Power BI world. So what we're going to do is I'm going to start off by making my title. So we're going to do NCAA finances, or let's go revenues and expenses. Let's make this a 20. I'm going to bold it a little bit here. The color is fine. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to indicate that this is the summary view by putting the pipe here and then making this just a little bit smaller and unbolding so that we know this is our summary view. This is how I like to format a lot of my reports / dashboards. If you've seen any of my reports before, you've probably seen this header type. It's just one that I like to do. You can play with the color of the pipe here too if there are other theme colors that might make more sense. So we'll just go with like, I think that's gold. Okay, so our next requirement was, so we did the total profits calc using M, and that's the Power Query language. Now what we're going to do is we're going to create our 3 high-level KPIs. So we could use a multi-row card here. I'm going to explain why I'm not going to use that here in just a second, but I'm going to click on my card. It creates a card visual within our pane. And because this first area is going to be revenues, I can always type in my fields to find the different columns or the fields that I'm looking for, whether that be a measure or a calculated column. The difference between the two we'll cover in later challenges, but right now we want this field, total revenues, and we're going to place it right here. As you can see, you can click on the down arrow and find the different aggregations you want, but I'm going to sum it. So I'm going to place that right here, and then I'm going to have, so what you can do in Power BI is you can Control C and you can Control V, and you can actually just copy your elements within your report. This is not always the case in every other visualization software. It's something that I very much like about Power BI. So we have our revenues. Let's get our expenses. And let's grab our total expenses, and then let's grab our new field, total profits, and we'll put that there. So as you can see, kind of like our first one, we are on our way there. Let's make this into millions, because billions seems to be a little much, especially if we're not going to go into especially if we're going to drill into different years or conferences. It's most likely not going to maintain at the billions level. So you can select in your data label, you can go down here and let's turn this to millions for all 3. And if you cycle through each one, it'll stay in the same place within your format pane here. Okay, cool. So now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go up, I'm going to turn my title on because I understand that that's revenues, but I want to give the section as a whole more of a feel that it's the section that we're referring to and not just that KPI. So I'm going to come here so that we see revenues, expenses, and profits across the top. Next, we need to make a trend line. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to Control C, Control V again, because I like to just use the fields that were already present in here within my, take the fields that were in my KPI in this card, and now I'm going to use as my trend line. Since I already have it selected, I can come here. I'm going to choose a line chart for my trend line, but there's no axis in here yet. So I'm going to come here and bring the year to my axis. So that's going to create my trend line, and you can do either copy and paste the KPI, or you can copy and paste the trend line. I think I'm just going to copy and paste the trend line, bring that across, and then just replace with the other measures. Awesome. I understand that this is for revenues, so I'm just going to turn off my titles on here because it's kind of understood that if by proximity placing this underneath that these are going to relate, especially since we have these category headers up here. Okay, so we have our profits created, we have our 3 high level KPIs, we have our trend lines. Now I'm going to go with our conference breakdowns. So what I'm going to do is, again, I'm going to just copy and paste this element in here to keep the total revenues field available. And now I'm going to come back to my visualizations pane and I'm going to choose a bar chart. I'm going to choose a bar chart because I like in our breakdowns, especially on a summary view, to have the bar chart look to get a high level comparison of how everything looks compared to one another. Let's take our conference abbreviation from our conference dimension and we're going to put that in the axis. So you can see here that now I have a bar chart showing the total revenues for each of the teams, or excuse me, for each of the conferences. But what I'm going to do here, just to save a little space, is I'm going to turn on the title. Instead of being revenues, I understand that this is in our revenues section. We can go revenues by conference. Now, what I can do is I can save us a little space by turning off the y-axis title. And because I already know that it's total revenues, we can turn off our x-axis title. We can save ourselves a little space. Now, one thing we can do to save ourselves even more space is I'm going to turn on the data labels, which will enable me to turn the x-axis off completely, because I don't always need to know the axis if I do have the labels next to it. Some of that's preference. You may not agree, but generally if I have the labels and the axis is set from 0 to wherever, and even if it's not, you can generally get away with it. You could turn on the axis, it's your choice, but in this instance, I'm going to turn it off. So now I'm going to place my breakdown at the bottom with a little bit of space, give us a little white space to let it breathe just a little bit. And now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to Control C, Control V. I'm going to do it again. And now I'm just going to have to replace my measures like this. To have to replace my title, I'm not using a function to do it. I'm just going to do it manually for now, and that's okay with me. So now we have our total profits. Oh, excuse me, I did not go back to our fields here. Total profits into values. And then we have to change our title to profits by conference. Cool. So now we have all of our requirements met. We have our profits field that was created in Power Query, excuse me. We have our 3 high-level KPIs. We have our trend lines here, and then we have our conference breakdowns. We also indicate that this is our summary view, and this design is completely up to you. It can look a little differently. You can add in a line. Sometimes I do that to break out and just make sure that I understand where the header starts and where it ends. So if we wanted to put a little, a line here, we can adjust the line, and this is in the format shape category. We can make it either like a light gray, or that, that light blue wasn't bad. And then I would just like make the weight just a little bit less. Well, I'm going to make it gray. Awesome. So this is the challenge for this week. Again, it doesn't have to look like this, but this is my solution. We have our revenues here showing us totals, trends, and conference breakdown. We have our expenses, totals, trends, conference breakdown. We have our profits, trends, conference breakdown. That's the goal for this week. You can have fun with the design. Would love to see what people come up with, but the goal is those requirements. Here's a couple of the other ones I've done that look very similar. And again, yeah, you can see I played a little bit with the header here. But this is the basics. Understanding how to place different chart types onto the report canvas. Really looking forward to what everyone comes up with. Thank you for participating this week, and we will see you in week 3.